Today we're going to be grinding our skills Skyrim style by making a bunch of steel daggers. Stay tuned! Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. Before I run one of these episodes, I usually do a whole bunch of my own R&D. I try to learn a skill, try to find out different ways you can do it to kind of make it more cool for you, and then I film. I figured it might actually be a fun episode to do it with you. So in honor of kind of grinding out skills by doing experimentation, I figure we can make the steel dagger from Skyrim. My thought with this though is to specifically make it as a prop. So either like foam that you can use at a LARP or something you can use as a prop at maybe an event. And I, for a long time, have thought of different ways you could do this. Like, is there a way to make an injection mold fairly easily? Are there different surface finishes that'll work better than others? Things I've kind of wanted to play with, but just haven't had the time. So that's today. We're gonna try them out. I promise it's not just a thinly veiled episode to mask my own failures. So without much further ado, let's jump right into it and level up this skill. Now, as I mentioned in the forward, the primary thing I really wanted to try to see if I could make some sort of like an injection mold, right? So we can put the foam inside, it'll expand, and boom, we mill out a knife. In theory. So to actually test this theory though, I found this 3D model here of the Skyrim steel dagger. I'll leave the link where I found it on Thingiverse down below in case you want to print it out too. This printed in a bunch of different pieces, but it was nothing that a little bit of time and super glue couldn't handle. This left me with this really nice dagger, although that tip's a little curved. Nobody likes a curved tip. Luckily, we're going to be fixing that in the next step. The tip is too sharp. It should be more rounded like this dagger here. You basically don't want to make something that you can poke into somebody's eye. That's generally frowned upon in like group fun events. You only make that mistake once. But this was easily solved by taking my sandpaper block here and just kind of rounding off that top until it matched more closely with what we're looking for. Doing that also helped me correct for that curve that was going on there. I was able to kind of straighten it back up by sanding it back into shape. With that good, I just went back in and sanded the whole thing down and try to get all those print lines as flat as possible. I haven't made a lot of like 3D models or whatever, so I turned to the internet to figure out how to make it more smooth, because if we add that to like a silicone mold, the silicone will pick up every detail, even those print lines. Luckily, I found this little YouTube short from a channel called Universe of Emily that does a great job explaining how to smooth the print. Definitely go check that channel out. She's really good at what she does. Anyways, what I learned is we could actually grab wood filler here and use it in combination with acetone. By mixing these two together to make kind of a wood filler slurry, we can paint it onto the print and the wood filler will fill in all those cracks. And then the acetone dries so quickly, leaving behind that filler, that we can apply a bunch of coats pretty quickly and build it up so it's smooth really fast. Once it's sanded nice and smooth, it's actually like perfect. It's a really cool tip. Then we're just gonna use an automotive primer, which will not only prime the piece, but it'll also fill in any more of those little inconsistencies, making it like perfectly smooth. And once that's sanded down, it was beautiful. Really, I think that's one of the best like 3D print jobs I've ever done. Really good tips. That came out nice. All right, now before we carry on, I do want to address kind of the elephant in the room here. A lot of comments from last video say that I'm mean for not having an extra chair here for Maddie. But thanks to today's sponsor, FlexiSpot, we do have a new chair. It's so nice. Oh, it's so rolly. It's so nice. This beautiful bad boy is the C7, and it is the nicest chair I think I've ever had. Let me tell you what, the old editing chair, it was absolutely killing my back, and I just felt awful after a day worth of working. This bad boy though has a self-adaptive dynamic system, which means the lumbar support detects like little changes you make and adjusts itself. It's also generally like super adjustable. I can adjust the armrest, I can adjust the back all I want. I can take a nap when I'm supposed to be editing. Oh, it's so good. Heck, if you're even one of those people who like to sit cross-legged in your chairs, it's got a big old wide seat so you can. And if you look and you feel like this one's a little bit too pricey for you, they have the C2, which is just over $100. Just as comfy, just a few less bells and whistles. If you want to level up your desk chair game and support the channel, now's the best time because FlexiSpot is having their biggest sale of the year. Just use code BDC7 for 60% off. Again, just click on that link below and use BDC7 for 60% off of your chair. And though I'm not gonna let her sit in it, I think Maddie's gonna be really happy for me for having this chair. But now we're actually set up to make our mold here. Now I've covered this a bunch of times, but real quick, basically I'm gonna end up making a little box to actually make my mold out of. To do this, I just used some 4-inch wide pieces of wood that I hot glued in a roughly box shape to a piece of plywood. I also went ahead and screwed on some scrap boards just onto the outsides of that, because I have had occasions where my glue up failed and everything just kind of fell over. Oh, what a nightmare that is. That was a bad day. Happy with that, I just busted out some clay to line the bottom with till it was about halfway up the mold. This I just used a little cheap plastic trowel to get as smooth as possible. Then I simply pushed my knife into that mix until it was about the halfway point. Again, we're gonna be using a liquid silicone and it's really easy for it to seep into places, so it's a good idea to go back around your piece and just make sure the clay is really connecting to it. Once that was nice and secure, I added a mound at the tip of the handle to make a little sprue hole, as well as these 2 little roll-ups of clay coming off the sides of the handles. By leaving little pieces of clay there, they're gonna make little furrows or holes that'll go all the way through and will help the air have a place to escape. For one last touch, I just removed some pieces of clay here in random shapes, which are gonna end up acting as a key. Those random kind of shapes only line up one way, right? So everything's gonna have to align up perfectly. With that all good, I just busted out this 2-part silicone rubber that I got from Amazon. You just combine both parts together in equal measure and then stir it up until it's all combined. Then I just filled up my mold until I was sure everything was covered. So the downside, depending on how you look at it, is the fact that that silicone is now gonna take like 6 hours to cure. Which, I mean, we could just wait patiently, or we could do more tests in the meantime. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Because there's another parameter to consider while we're doing stuff like this. Like, it's cool to know if we can make a LARP knife or sword or something with this injection mold kind of thing. But is that the most economical way to do it? Is it the best way to do it? I don't know. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna really quickly, while that cures, see how long it takes me to just like soup to nuts make a knife. And while I'm doing that, I have kind of an experiment I want to do along the way in regards to finish that I've never been able to like try out. Now I've covered making like a LARP sword a couple of times. The latest one I did was actually right here. So you can check that out if you're just interested in learning how to do that. I'm gonna be less clean with this one. This is more of an experiment than anything else. So I just went ahead and made a paper template so I could then cut that shape out of some of this foam. Now the foam I have to use is actually this kind of wide cell EVA foam here, which really isn't my go-to. I don't like starting with something that rough a texture, but it is cheaper and I'm interested to play with it at least for this experiment. I'm also gonna end up putting a core into this thing so it'll hold its shape. Just a heads up, and they aren't sponsoring this at all, but I actually got these things through Bergsnyder. They have a line of crafting supplies called Madcraft, and I'm gonna be using some of their things for this right now. I only mention that because so far this is my favorite core that I've ever used. It doesn't like stick inside of your fingers or anything. It's actually really nice. So yeah, I do the standard stuff of putting the rod where it'll go into the foam, gluing all the pieces together, and then bringing it over to my sander to help shape it. Finally, I use my Dremel with a sanding drum just to add a little bit of extra detail in there. And I'm not gonna lie, that came out pretty good. Now, the one downside to this kind of foam that I'm using is the fact that it is really rough. In fact, even after I hit it with the heat gun, which normally kind of melts it and makes all those openings close up, it still was pretty rough, which normally would make me upset, but it's perfect for the experiment I want to run. You see, in the past, only thing I've ever used to kind of seal the foam before painting it has been some of this Plasti Dip. And it's totally worked great, but I've also heard some good things about using liquid latex to kind of seal it as well. So I figured for a fun experiment, we'd use both. Basically, I'll spray one side with the Plasti Dip, and then I'll brush on the latex on the other side, trying to keep it like as halfway as possible. And honestly, this was really cool. As you can see, the side that had the Plasti Dip on it actually really still looks like texture and pitted, while the side with the latex came out really smooth. I mean, you can see my brush strokes. I was using like a really cheap chip brush. I think if I were to do this again, I'd probably either use a sponge, or honestly, I wonder if you could just kind of dip it into it and have it come out really smooth. I don't know, something to try out later on. I figure a way to really kind of drive this home though is to actually kind of paint it up like how I'd want it to look. So I just added this flexible metallic silver paint, making sure it covered the blade nice and evenly. I also used a metallic brass for the handle. And look, I know that the Skyrim steel daggers just steel all the way through, but that would look kind of flat and boring, especially because I didn't take the time to put in like a lot of the detail. So I'm taking an artistic license on this one. It's gonna be brass. And honestly, that looks really cool. Again, as you can see, the latex side's pretty smooth, while that plasti dip side is really kind of pitted and rough looking. Even along the edge where the plasti dip side kind of left that furry sharpness, the latex side ended up being nice and smooth and laying all that kind of mess down. Now, at this point though, I know it's just an experiment, but it's an ugly little dagger, and I don't mind something being ugly, but I want it to be ugly with purpose. So, and I don't know if it's just a mod. In vanilla Skyrim, do they have rusty weapons? My Skyrim is like modded to the gills, and I know I have rusty weapons. I have an inventory of far too many of them to melt down to make new things. Also, wheels of cheese. Don't know why I do it. Every time I pass one, wheel of cheese, it's mine. Anyway, since it's already pitted and nasty looking, I decided to make this a rusty steel dagger. So first, to add in that extra grime of time, I simply mixed a 50-50 ratio of black paint and water. This will just give me a simple wash that I can paint all over the dagger, letting it find all the deepest kind of pitted parts to settle in, and then lightly patting it off. This, instead of hiding all those pits, really accentuates them, making it look old and gnarly. For the rust effect, all I did was grab some of this copper paint, along with some brown, which when mixed together actually makes a really convincing copper color. By adding just a little bit to a brush and then dabbing it until it's almost dry, I'm able to apply it onto the blade where I want to add in this kind of rusted old look. And honestly, for such little work, that's pretty good. For one last little detail, I decided to wrap the handle in this leather cordage. Finally, I also added the black wash to that because it looked way too clean and this thing needs to look gnarly and old. And check out how good that looks. I'm really pleased with how much we were able to make that pitted kind of nastiness work for us. Now it looks like it's meant to be that way, which I dig. Normally that would like kind of piss me off. Now I really, really love it. Soup to nuts probably took me about 2.5 hours to make the whole thing. Soon thereafter though, our silicone mold was ready to demold. I didn't plan that out right at all. Anyways, this was as easy as popping my box off and then peeling off that layer of clay at the bottom. And I was super happy to see that it looked like everything came out really, really clear. With that looking good, I just made sure my little clay plugs were in place so that I still had the sprue on the top and the two little air release things on the side. Rebuilt the box around it. Again, making sure it's as tight as possible and even using some clay around the sides of the silicone, just so that the liquid silicone doesn't leak underneath it. Before I can add the silicone to the next layer though, we need to put a release agent on there. That's because silicone in general won't stick to anything except itself. If I were to just pour the silicone on top of that mold, it would become one solid mold of silicone. And that wouldn't be helpful at all. So for this, I'm using this Ease Release 200. All I have to do is spray it and make sure it well coats everything. Then I just poured another mixture of that liquid silicone, and in about 6 hours time, bam, look at that. It is perfect. The detail is so great. With this, I can make like as many plastic knives as I want really, really easily. But that's not what we're trying to do. I want to try foam in this bad boy. Not only that, but I want to try it with like a core. Though I can't just kind of plop the core in here because then it'll just kind of sink to the bottom and it'll end up like on the surface, which won't help anything. You kind of want the padding to like pad the core, right? So in order to get around this, I just added these little squares of foam with the core passing through it. This way I can kind of rest it directly in the middle of my form here, giving me just enough lift so it's not going to touch the sides, and it'll hopefully hold itself in place in the middle. Sure, you're going to be able to see a little bit of the foam on the edges, but the whole thing will be made out of foam, and I'm going to like treat it and seal it anyways, so that really shouldn't be a problem. So with that in place, I carefully sandwiched the two pieces back together, and then use some boards and clamps to keep it together in line. Now for my foam, I'm using a product made by Smooth On called Flex Foam 6. Flex Foam comes in a bunch of different numbers, and number 6 is like pillow soft, which I think is probably too soft for this application. I actually had it left over from when I made LARP arrows, which you can see right here. But again, we're experimenting. I just need proof of concept here. You're on a super limited time with this stuff. Once they're actually combined together, you only have like 30 seconds to make sure it's stirred thoroughly before you have to actually start pouring it. So once I was frantically done stirring this stuff, I carefully poured it into my mold and then just kind of started punching my mold to give some vibration with the hopes that all of that foam would transfer down to the bottom. Remember, I have those little square cores in there and I was afraid it was going to get caught up on those. And within just a few minutes, you could see this foam just kind of pouring out of every orifice here. This stuff expands to be 10 times the volume of what you put in there. And I'm actually kind of proud of myself with how close I got. Like, you can see stuff coming out of these holes, but it really wasn't a lot. It was just enough so that it just barely bubbled out of the sprue hole, which is like perfect. I'm very happy with that. And after 2 hours, this was ready to be demolded. And honestly, it came out really good. The texture isn't as smooth as I wanted it to be, but the detail is all really there and super nice. But a couple of things. One, the pillow soft definitely is too weak. So I probably need to move up in the hardness scale if I was going to be actually using this. Also, the core I'm using is too thick. It was originally going to be like for a sword that I'm going to try to make later on. It's partially why I'm playing with this right now. But yeah, it's too close to the surface. You wouldn't want that. That's too hard. That coupled with the fact that I actually think that the blade itself is too thin for a LARP blade. Like, even if I had a really thin core, I'm afraid that there just wouldn't be enough there to keep it safe. And you can see the difference kind of when I'm accounting for the core, like it's a good 3 times as thick. But with all that said, proof of concept is here. I mean, the core is actually right in the middle too. The detail looks good. If this was a bit denser of a foam, it would actually be like super nice, just ready to paint. Though just because you could doesn't mean you should. Like, again, this took me maybe about 3 hours tops to make. But with this one, it took me significantly longer. What, like 15 hours with making the molds and all that stuff? 6-hour drive time each? And then 2-hour cure time with this, plus all the work in the middle? Like, that's significant. That said, if you were trying to make a lot of them, then yeah, once it's set up, it takes 2 hours a pop to get like super detail and whatever you want. Also, this is like twice as expensive. I'd say if you were starting from scratch and you had to buy all the materials, probably about $100 to make this one. This one here with the cheaper materials I'm using, probably closer to like $200, $250. But again, once you have it and you've got the right foam, I only use like this much of that foam. I could probably get, I don't know, like 20 of these out of that one bottle. It might work out. I say if you wanted to mass produce and you wanted to be all the same, definitely make a mold. If you're just kind of making one-offs for yourself though, there's no reason that the sandwich method is still going to be the better method. Now, since I have that mold though, I really wanted to conduct another experiment. You see, Madcraft actually also has this really cool foam clay. It's got this sticky consistency of clay, but it dries to be a foam. And I thought maybe we can just kind of ram jam it into our mold and make it that way. This stuff is really wet and sticky though, so it helps if you kind of leave it out to dry for like 10 or 15 minutes. Just so it doesn't stick to your hands a lot while you're trying to mold it. Also, adding the demolding agent to the mold is going to help out a bunch too. With that all said, I just jammed it inside of there to see if it would work. And to make sure it was as flat as possible, I actually used the can like a rolling pin and just flattened that all out. Once I was happy with that, I put it in the freezer for about an hour just to make it solid enough to demold without losing all of my detail. And then 24 hours from then, I just kind of removed the flashing and saw what I was working with. And yeah, the detail is actually really good. But I can tell you right away, there's a few issues with this. One, the kind of foam it ends up being is not one I would trust for like a LARP weapon. Maybe for like a prop or something, but it's definitely not a dense enough foam that I trust really abusing it. But that's not the only issue. My biggest issue is the fact that when it dries, it doesn't dry perfectly flat, no matter how much I try to make that happen. It kind of bubbles a little bit, and if I was able to like glue it down, I might get those edges pretty close. I just don't think they're ever gonna look good. I'll have to fill them a lot and try to shape them. And honestly, at that point, I could have just used foam already. Where it is good though, is all of this detail work here. What I'd probably do instead is use it just to make that detail and use that as an applique, like cut out this piece to add on to other foam pieces. That'll allow me to get really in-depth detail without like doing the extra work of having to carve it out. Fun experiment though. All right, now is one last thing just because I can't leave well enough alone. I did really love how this plastic knife came out. So I just decided to see what that would look like painted up. I just used the same silver paint and all that jazz, though this time I made sure that my black wash was a lot thicker. This way it stayed down in that detail and it really added a lot of depth to that look. Finally, for the handle, I used this kind of thin leather wrapping, which I love the look of. Look at how great that came out. That looks amazing. Like, you can't use it in a LARP, it's gonna hurt somebody, but as like a phys rep, a physical representation of something, maybe like a cursed knife or a quest item, that came out awesome. And since I have a mold, I can manufacture these as much as I want. Anyways, I know this episode was really different, but I think it demonstrates something that has been super helpful for me. Ever since I was a wee little children, I've taken martial arts, and my teacher really kind of harped on investing in loss. The way he meant it was when we were just kind of sparring with each other for practice, if we went into the ring trying to win, then we were so concerned with winning and doing everything right that we actually didn't practice anything. But if we instead went in trying to make a technique work while somebody was actively trying to make sure we couldn't make that technique work, we either figured out how to make it work or figured out it doesn't work for us, but by the end, we really knew how to do this thing. And I honestly feel like the same goes for whenever we're doing like crafting projects or trying to learn a skill. If all I cared about was making this thing as perfect as I could the first time through, then I spent an endless amount of time watching tutorials on YouTube to try to figure out how to do it right the first time, and just end up copying what everybody else was doing, not ever learning like new interesting ways of doing something. And that isn't bad as a means to an end, but if you really kind of want to level up your skills, it's fantastic to just take time, invest in the fact that the thing that's going to come out might not be awesome, but you're just trying some stuff out. But let me know what you thought. Did you like this kind of style episode where we freeform mess around with stuff? Or do you prefer the more kind of concrete tutorials once I figured it all out? Leave down in the comment section below. I'd really be interested to see what you think. Now a heads up, we're drawing close to the conclusion of round 1 of our Level Up LARP competition. Now you can watch the details in this video here. But I will tell you that the grand prize winner will get to come with us to Germany to Conquest, the largest LARP in the world. This year we have our own skill tree camp in there, and there's already like 25 people who are going to be coming with us, which I am just ecstatic about. I can't wait. And don't worry if you feel like you missed this round of Level Up LARP, because the next one's going to start immediately after it. So yeah, check out that video or links in the description below to see how you can win. Also, if I'm being honest, there's like a really steep discount of the Bergsnyder site connected to it, so you can just kind of use that and game the system. Just saying. Don't tell Bergsnyder I said it though. Now, if you're watching this channel, odds are you like to make projects, and I'd love to see them. As such, I highly recommend you join our Discord community. These are just some of the projects the people there are working on right now, and honestly, they are incredible. Not only are these projects amazing, but the community itself is amazing. Everybody there is super helpful, eager to share their knowledge, share the projects they're working on, and generally just kind of nerd out and be cool. It's one of the things I'm most proud of helping create. They're fantastic people over there. So yeah, definitely go check that out. Link in the description below. All right, that's all I got. Make sure if you enjoyed this episode, give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't release new content. It really goes a long way, all the like subscribing and thumb up and commenting to supporting this channel. It's super helpful. In the meantime though, keep leveling up, you. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we can't do any of this without them. A special shout out to our newest high tier Patreon level members, Nicholas DeCritico, Stormy Moans, and Siri. And a super huge thank you to our Grand Master level members, Yuri Santro, Dragon Designs, and Froggy. It means the world to us that you help support us in that way, and again, we just can't do this without you, so it's amazing. Thank you so much. If you like what we do here, consider joining our Patreon and supporting us, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can click on one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps a lot too. I have so many daggers! Behold my daggers. I fought off so many a Draugr for these. I've earned these, fighting off so many a Draugr. Behold my might. I shall learn the fine art of dual wielding. I shall learn the fine art of dual wielding. Fight off Draugrs and such. I'm gonna mill just so many more of these. They're so much fun.